Hello, I'm Alex. This video is about DBN Napoleonic Wargaming. DBN is a Grand Tactical Napoleonic Wargame rule system, and the main purpose of this video is to show you the different unit types that you find on the DBN battlefield. So let's first of all have a look at the standard units that you'll find. This group here, there's actually 4 units there, and these are musket units. The musket unit represented as 8 figures on a base. This is your heavy close order infantry firing in volleys. This base in the standard DBN wargame represents 2,000 to 2,500 men, basically a brigade of infantry, including its integral skirmishers, and includes units in line and column formation. I've got 4 units here just to show the variety of units that you can easily have and represent from a modelling point of view. That's the 33rd Foot, one of my local regiments, Italians, Russians and Danish. That's musket infantry. Next one along in the infantry is light infantry. That's 6 figures on a base, on a slightly deeper base. As in all DBN wargaming, the base frontage stays the same on every single base, but the depth can vary. This is the Austrian Grenzers light infantry. Light infantry very good in the woods, vulnerable to cavalry, don't have the same hitting power as the musket units, but have a slightly better range. The third type of infantry are a unit called Jaegers. These represent the specifically trained skirmishers. These are professionally trained skirmishers, trained in operating in pairs, making use of cover. They're in very limited numbers, and they represent 800 to 900 men. They have an extra long range, very good in cover and built-up areas. However, they are very vulnerable if caught in close combat. So that's the 3 standard infantry. These are Prussian Jaegers. Moving on to the cavalry, we have 4 types of cavalry. Heavies, represented as 4 figures on a base. These are French cuirassiers. Mainly there will be cuirassier type units, and in DBN the cuirass does have a small benefit for ranged infantry fire, nothing else. The heavy cavalry are better in close combat against light cavalry, they have a better factor, and very effective against infantry if they break through the infantry. Next one is light cavalry. That's 3 figures to a base. They move faster than the heavy cavalry, but obviously not as good in combat with the heavy cavalry, and this is the majority of the cavalry on the table. The next one along is skirmishing cavalry, and you achieve skirmishing cavalry by exchanging a light cavalry figure unit for a skirmishing cavalry unit, and these are a little bit faster and more comfortable in bad going. They're a looser order, but obviously less combat factor. They're of limited use, good for specific scenarios. And this unit at the back you probably recognise as Cossacks. These are the most nimblest cavalry on the battlefield, but with a low combat value. They're more of a nuisance factor on the battlefield. But one interesting thing about the Cossacks with DBN, if they're destroyed, they don't count towards victory conditions. Basically, sad but true, but the loss of Cossacks don't really count. So that's the cavalry types. There's 2 types of artillery on the standard DBN game. One is foot artillery, with 4 figures on a base, and the other one is horse artillery with 3 figures on a base, and obviously a smaller model gun and a bigger model gun. The difference is that foot artillery have a longer range than horse artillery, but horse artillery can move and fire. And this is quite a bonus. Therefore, on the points, vast majority of these units cost 1 point each. However, horse artillery cost 1.5 points. They're expensive, and historically they were expensive as well with all the extra horses. So the only other type we've got here is the generals. Again, I've shown two types of general. They're just higher, the further higher up the command chain, you know, army commander, corps commander, then you have a slightly bigger base and more figures on it. But that's the command bases. And this here is the baggage. In DBN, every army has a baggage. It counts towards victory conditions. If the baggage usually counts for 2 victory conditions as opposed to 1 for killing a unit, and the very vulnerable if the cavalry, particularly the Cossacks, can get round the back. So you have to protect your baggage, and you try and capture your opponent's baggage. That's a feature of the standard DBN game. So that there are the standard units, and I'll give you a close-up of the units just for interest's sake, and then we'll move on to the optional units, which are for more advanced players. There is 2 other musket units at the back of that board that I want to mention, and that's this unit of Austrian Grenadiers and this unit of French provincial infantry. With all the units, you can either have elites, regular or militia. That's the 3 normal combat class. And these 2 units just an example of an elite unit. So that's a unit of elite muskets, and that there is a unit of militia class muskets. And I say these are the French provincial infantry, best shown looking a little bit scruffy, and then you have the grenadiers. So with all this infantry, the different types and cavalry, you can have elites or you can have militia. Thank you. Now what I'm going to just do now is just give you a quick close-up. Focus is a little bit of a challenge. Mixture of manufacturers. Just give you an idea. Okay, here we have the optional unit types. The first one I want to talk about is the superior light infantry. Here you notice we have 2 types of, they have the musket unit and the light infantry unit. Basically, a superior light infantry can switch between musket and light roll. Sometimes it's of benefit. There's more of a hitting power when you're in close order musket than it is in light. This is only available to certain nationalities, the French in particular, except 1813 and 14, also includes the British and the Prussians in 1815. These are light infantry that are just as comfortable in close order as they are in light order, loose order. All light infantry could form close order, however, most of the light infantry were not that comfortable when in close order. The superior ones were as comfortable in close order as they were in light, so that represents them, and there's rules for changing during the battle from one into the other. Can be very, very useful and fairly unique to the French. The next one is Old Guard. These are elite infantry, but have an extra elite status when in close combat. However, they're important for victory conditions. If they get destroyed, they're quite severe on the army morale. So they need protecting, and they're expensive from a points basis. The next along here, these are known as levy en masse, and they're represented here by some Spanish infantry, and Russian Olpanichi, however you pronounce it. There is normal militia class Spanish infantry, but these are levy en masse, which is a class lower than militia class. They are very cheap. For every one normal unit you can have 4 levy en masse units. However, they have no ranged firing ability because they were equipped with sometimes pikes, sometimes a mixture of pikes and muskets, sometimes improvised weapons. So they have no ranged ability. They combat as militia class infantry. However, the first time they come into combat in any form, they may run away. There's a 50-50 chance on a simple dice throw whether they stay on the battlefield or run away. So as you can imagine, if you're fighting a Spanish army with a lot of levy en masse, it looks very impressive, but it can quickly just disappear off the battlefield. So they're quite good fun, but it's fairly unique to the Spanish and the Russians. Moving along here, what we've got is light cavalry, and these are superior light cavalry. As I've said, these are optional rules, and these types of units tend to appear in specific scenarios, maybe even specific historical scenarios. They just give you some extra little options. And these superior light cavalry are between line and elite. They're not elite, but they are definitely superior than standard line. And this is important when you have cavalry versus cavalry combat, and that's the only bonus that they will get when they are fighting other light cavalry. So when superior light cavalry fight other light cavalry, they have an advantage. And these represent historical units. I mean, this one here is the Chevalier, Austrian Chevalier, if I'm pronouncing that right. It's the 4th O'Reilly Chevalier, quite a famous, very large cavalry regiment, and they would be superior if they were fighting against the standard French chasseur regiment or something like this. But if they came across heavies, they would have no benefit, no extra bonus. And the other one here, I've got French dragoons. In certain circumstances, the French dragoons would be superior in close combat to other light cavalry regiments, and again you can represent that by classing them as superior light cavalry. Again, that's a game option. Often with the reason we don't have French dragoons in as medium cavalry or heavy cavalry is because unfortunately the dragoons was the poor man's cavalry. They got the worst of the horses, and they got the lesser quality manpower. Moving on to this one here, we all recognise that as the British Rocket Battery. That's an fun thing more than anything. It moves and fires as a horse artillery unit, but you have the random factor of the rockets swinging away or blowing up and killing its crew. And one factor is it can't support anybody in combat. Everyone keeps well away when the rocket fires. It's a fun thing. It's a fun thing to play. Moving on to the back row here, you can have mounted infantry. So these move as skirmish cavalry on the battlefield, and then they dismount and they become Jaegers. Usually they are one class lower, either mounted or dismounted, depending on their historical type. Some were more comfortable mounted, some are more comfortable dismounted, depending on the type. You can also have camels as well for the French in Egypt and the Ottomans. They would have them as mounted infantry. Americans use mounted infantry. They do appear in specific scenarios. Next along here are Spanish guerrillas. Again, another unique unit type, and we've got the mounted irregular cavalry, a bit like Cossacks as well behind. These fellas, as in a few other rule types, they're not deployed on the battlefield. They appear as if by magic into bad going on the battlefield. So they're an extra quirk. They appear from nowhere, they fight the combat, and they can disappear. So they're an interesting unit type, easily killed off, and not that effective, but can be a real nuisance. These little figures here, they represent special ADCs. These are unique individual characters, often of historical fame, and they would gallop forward and gloriously lead units into battle and give them an extra combat bonus. And that's what these are for. In a points game you pay for them. In historical scenarios they'll be around, and they stay with the CNC or commander, and he then dispatches them off to units and leads them into battle. They are very vulnerable and they often die in battle, and if they don't succeed they can gallop off the battlefield in ignominy. You know, there's shame, you know, because they haven't succeeded, so they leave the battlefield. This little unit here is known as a detachment. Again, it's an advanced optional rule, but you can actually detach units from the main unit to form these small detachments. The problem with these is they're very vulnerable. A single hit and they're gone, and have limited fire factor, but they can serve as garrisons and can be useful in specific situations. This guy here, this one is General Alton. He commands the British Light Division, and you can have a lower level of command again, and these guys have an intrinsic value and specifically command a small formation. In particular, the British Light Division are identified in the DBN rules. Finally, this little artillery unit on the end, these are the regimental artillery that you see in the early wars, and they're represented with two models. They have to be attached, they can't move on their own, they have to be attached to infantry units, and they have they fire as militia artillery, and they have a limited range and combat value. But there was a lot of them around in the early wars, so it's an option with the DBN. So there you have it, all the different unit types. Of course you have elites and militias, and you have elite lights, and lots of other plays on the main unit types. But I hope you found that interesting. Thank you very much. And a close-up of the specialist unit types, just to give you a little idea. I'm sure we'll lose focus a little bit, just so you see what I've been pointing out.